Well, I'm not surprised. The only thing I'm surprised about is the fact that she was acquitted on one of the counts. But that makes a little sense that dealt with basically trafficking in between states, and maybe they just didn't have enough evidence on that. But I'm not surprised by the conviction. There's a lot of evidence against her.
There were rumours there could have been a mistrial. There seemed to be an element of nervousness emitting, certainly from those surrounding the judge, when you started to hear that she was asking people to stay an hour later on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Did you think a mistrial was a possibility?
Well, I did, because think about also the COVID rate in Manhattan, where this courthouse is, the federal courthouse. And then you've also got the fact that the judge wanted the jurors to deliberate maybe to the weekend and through a holiday. You'll always get at least one or two jurors that balk at that. And so if you don't have all 12 jurors, they're all sick given the case, then you can't have a verdict and you have to start over. So that factor was clearly there, but of course abated because they reached a verdict.
And of course, the judge commenting on the astronomical, I think that was the word she used, spike in COVID-19 cases in New York. The worry was that so many jury members would have to quarantine, and that was a distinct possibility. What was it, do you think, that made the jury come to this decision now? We were expecting this to last a few more days, weren't we?
Well, yes, we were. But the thing is, when you're up against Christmas, you're up against New Year's, you're up against any kind of a holiday, jurors will basically come to a decision a lot more quickly. They'll compromise a little bit more. They're told to do that in the jury instructions. As long as it doesn't invoke some violence against your own beliefs about the evidence in the case, you're encouraged as a juror to compromise and reach a verdict in the United States. And apparently that's what they did. Time was a wasting. They'd actually deliberated quite a while. They'd asked for transcripts in this case. They'd asked for different items of evidence. They were very careful in their deliberations, and they were ready.
A little bit more about the case itself. We heard, didn't we, from four people who said they'd been abused by Jeffrey Epstein at the hands of Ghislaine Maxwell during their time with the socialite and her boyfriend. What was it like when the jury heard those testimonies, and what was the atmosphere like in court?
Nobody likes to hear about child abuse, and 18 is a minor in the United States. When you talk about trafficking charges, trafficking can also be of adults, but we had a 14-year-old. And what happened in this case was horrific. All of the hundreds of times these young women were abused, they were vulnerable. They were groomed by Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, she took them to Jeffrey Epstein, and she sexually abused these young girls herself. But they're young women now, and like the prosecutor said in their closing argument, they banked on them being vulnerable, trash, I think was the word she used, that wouldn't come forward and testify against Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But they grew into young women, and here they are, and they came into a courtroom.
The women that we've heard a lot from over the last few months is one Virginia Giuffre. She has just within the last few minutes tweeted, and if I can read this out for you, Anne, and then ask for your reaction. Virginia Giuffre has just tweeted, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I will always remember this day. Having lived the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other girls and young women who suffered at her hands and whose lives she destroyed." And in a second tweet, but of course Twitter is capped on how many characters you can use, so she's gone over into another tweet. Giuffre continues, "I hope that today is not the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith they will be." I think we all know what she's referring to there, don't we, Anne? We
do. Yes, we do. Of course, Prince Andrew, which she's referring to, and also Alan Dershowitz, in terms of the civil complaints that she's filed in this case, the civil complaint naming them. And of course, Prince Andrew has been served, properly so, in the United Kingdom. And we don't know if there would be anything criminally coming forth. But the fact is, she's been very vocal, she's been very brave, and she's indicated who abused her. And she wasn't abused just by Jeffrey Epstein. She wasn't abused just by Ghislaine Maxwell. He didn't testify in this trial, as we know. But she has made accusations, and the case is now in suit.
She's made many accusations, and of course, Prince Andrew and his legal team vehemently deny all the accusations that have been made against them. Let's make that completely clear. And let's underline that this story tonight is about Ghislaine Maxwell and what's happened in New York and the court case there. Yeah. So let's, for now, focus on that. And if we can, talk a little bit about the defence team, who spent quite a lot of time talking about Ghislaine Maxwell being scapegoated for the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein.
They did, and they talked a lot about the fact that she was basically tried by proxy, that she was standing in the place of Jeffrey Epstein. There was a portrait of Jeffrey Epstein in the courthouse that they asked to have taken down. They didn't want his specter, over like a shadow over the courtroom. And they said his shadow was there, but it wasn't fair to blame him or blame her for his crime. But the fact was, he was a partner in crime, according to the prosecutors, that she was with him in lockstep through all of this. She enabled him, she participated, and she was a co-conspirator. And she sexually trafficked young women. And that's what the counts involved. It was sex trafficking of young women. Some were very young, as the 14-year-old that we heard about, and some were older. But the fact is, they all grew into women, older women, that had the bravery to come forth in a federal courtroom and accuse her. Interestingly, when the verdict came in, at least from what I saw, she didn't really react. In a way, she knew.
And that's the verdict tonight that people will be digesting, analysing, no doubt all over the international newspapers tomorrow. What about sentencing, Anne? When can we expect that?
The judge didn't set a sentencing date today, but it will be sent shortly. The judge will ask for a pre-sentence report that will go through her history, her social history, other factors to consider in sentencing. But in the federal system, there are guidelines, almost like mathematical guidelines for sentencing. In this case, the counts will be consecutive counts of punishment. They won't be served at the same time. They'll be served stacked in a way. So she's looking at 65 to 70 years in the federal prison for these crimes in her sentence.